Hello, my dear viewers. Today is the 10th of March, and in my first article, I want to talk not about the events that are taking place on the Ukrainian fronts, but about what is happening around them. I have repeatedly said that the events in the information war, in the psychological war that is going on in all directions today, they are no less important than what is happening on the fronts. Because for some reason, among the top of the Ukrainian leadership, which drives this very idea into the heads of the Ukrainian subjects, there is an idea that literally tomorrow, literally in March or April, events will occur in Russia that will lead to the overthrow of the country's leadership. And thus, the war will be won. I'm now in Sevastopol. I see what is happening around. I also communicate with guys who live in other cities of Russia. This is one of the fairy tales and one of the most important deceptions that Kyiv tries to feed to the Ukrainians today. What I see in Russia is an unprecedented patriotic upsurge, because here they perceive the events in Ukraine as the second patriotic war, or rather the third. Here they perceive the events in Ukraine as a necessity. They need to liberate Ukraine and its people from the clique that started the war, but not in 2022, but in 2014. After all, the war, by and large, has been waged on the territory of Ukraine since 2014, but the population of Ukraine preferred not to notice it. They said, "It does not concern me, well, thank God." And war has such a property. If you don't notice it for a long time, then sooner or later it comes to your house. It's very scary. It's very bad. However, this has always been the case. But back to Russia, what's going on here? You know, the Russian leadership seems to be prepared very well for this war. And in this case, we are not talking about the war in Ukraine. We're talking about the war with the United States of America for the redivision of the world. In fact, I repeat it, and I will repeat, what is happening in Ukraine is a local episode. This episode will end sooner or later. The page will be turned, and events will move on. And the main events are yet to come. A big confrontation with the West suggests that there will be a powerful economic crisis. It was for this most powerful economic crisis that Russia was preparing throughout this time, and even earlier than 2014. Just since 2014, this training has gone in all directions and has become a priority for the country's leadership. And today, Western experts are surprised and horrified to understand that Russia really was preparing for everything that would happen. And it is precisely for this reason that today the majority of the Russian population is absolutely not afraid of either the groan of the dollar or anything else. Yes, they are afraid that they will live worse, but they will actually live worse, like the whole world. Nevertheless, this will definitely not lead to the consequences that both Ukraine and the West are counting on. But the West, it seems, was very wrong in its assessments. He made so big a bet that the Russians will get used to living well, and beginning to live worse, they will begin to fight with the authorities. Moreover, their first actions, that is, the sanctions that are imposed against Russia, say that they absolutely do not understand not only the Russian mentality, but also how Russian society lives. For example, in Russia they perceived very positively the fact that the West hit the Russian oligarchs. In Russia, the fact that Western companies live in Russia was very positively perceived, and the Russian leadership has essentially announced their nationalization. In general, it seems that these sanctions, which the West has made against Russia today, completely untie the hands of the country's leadership. It not only completely cleared out its political opposition and literally in a matter of days closed all their radio and TV outlets, it also began to make the reforms that Russian society has demanded of it over the past 2 decades. The sovereignty of the nation, nationalization and even democratization in the future. However, some industries will certainly close in Russia. All this will certainly happen, but in Russia there is also a huge labor shortage, which was previously filled by foreign workers. And if the number of jobs is reduced even by a couple of million people, this is not critical for Russia. Moreover, given the struggle that is unfolding today, a huge number of jobs in other industries will appear for people, especially for those who are used to sit in offices. It will be a powerful fissure, because they will have to repurpose or fall to the bottom. This applies to such cities as Moscow, St. Petersburg, and to a less extent other cities with a population of over 1 million. But the bulk of the inhabitants of Russia, by and large, don't care how much the dollar costs and whether they will have a job or not. Of course they will have it, and they understand this very well. The only thing that really worries many Russians at the moment is that the events that are taking place today on the territory of Ukraine do without big losses. This is what they really care about. Everything else that the West offers against Russia plays into the hands of the Russian leadership and not vice versa. But what is happening in the West? The inhabitants of some European countries are horrified. After all, everyone is well aware that sooner or later this crisis will affect them. In fact, the critical point will not even be passed in 2022, but most likely we will see it in 2023 or 2024. Its outcome will depend on how the economies of Russia, Europe and the United States prepared for the struggle. I want people not only in Ukraine and Russia to understand this. The fact that we are focusing on Ukraine today is just an episode. Believe me, it is by no means the most important episode in the struggle that has begun and the result of which will be a new world. Completely different world. And I repeat once again, the world to which we are all accustomed will no longer exist. In Ukraine, it collapsed at once. In Russia, these illusions will dispel in the coming weeks, maybe months, and the rest, the so-called civilized world, this terrible truth will begin to cover by the end of this year. Although some countries, such as the Baltic states, are already affected by it, and the leadership of such countries as Latvia looks with horror into this future. Precisely because this event is extremely important, I will pay more and more attention to this issue. This is what I want to say in this article. Sorry I didn't provide much specifics. We will consider that this is an introductory material for a very large topic, which we will talk about not only throughout 2022, but beyond. That's all for now. The next material, I suppose, will be a military summary. Goodbye.